Hey guys, this is question MM069 of the Maths Methods Sharpened Study Guide. On the axes below, sketch the graph of h of x equals 1/2 times the square root of x plus 2, take away 1. Label all axis intercepts and endpoints. Very, very important. So, I'm just going to get rid of this extra bit of paper and we'll have our axis here. So, what is first? So, personally, whenever I do a square root function, whenever I sketch one, I always look at what the endpoint is going to be. And the way we do that is by the general form of x take k. So let's say that y equals the square root of x take k plus h, where the endpoint is kh, which means that our endpoint is -2, -1. So we've got -2, -1. Now I'm doing this in pencil so that in case I stuff up the graph, I'll be able to rub it out, which is exactly what you should be doing as well. So I apologize if you can't see it as well as usual. So what's next? We've figured out our endpoint. Which way is this graph going to be pointing? Because with square root graphs, we can have them pointing a variety of different directions. Now, because the coefficient of the square root is positive and the coefficient of x is positive, this is going to be going in the positive direction, which is going to go up like this somewhere. But first, we actually need to work out what our intercepts are going to be. So for our y-intercept, x equals 0. So that means that h of 0 is equal to 1/2 times 0 plus 2, take away 1, which is equal to square root of 2 over 2, take away 1. So that's our y-intercept. Now, because this is a non-calculator, you're going to have to try and figure out where this lies on the graph. So the square root of 2 is about 1.414, I believe. So that divided by 2 is about 0.7, and then 0.7 take away 1 is about -0.3. So it's going to be on the negative side. It doesn't matter too much, but if it's on the positive side, then that's clearly wrong because you won't have an x-intercept over here. So let's work out what that x-intercept is actually going to be. So the x-intercept occurs when y equals 0. So let's go 0 equals 1/2 square root of x plus 2, take away 1. So we get +1 on both sides. And then if we divide both sides by 1/2, that will cancel. And it's the same, dividing by 1/2 is the same as timesing by 2. So we get 2 equals the square root of x plus 2. Squaring both sides, we get 4 equals x plus 2, which means that x equals +2, which means that our graph actually goes through the point 2, 0. And we can now draw a graph. We've got our y-intercept, our x-intercept, and our endpoint, which means that the graph is going to look something like this. Awesome. So that's it. So this is worth 3 marks. As with all graphs, you start with 3 marks and they take away marks based on what you didn't do. So we've got our axis labels there automatically, but what have we forgotten to do? We haven't written in our coordinates of anything. So our endpoint is -2, -1. Our y-intercept is what? 0, -2 on 2. Sorry, square root 2 on 2, -1. And our x-intercept is 2, 0. So now that we've labeled everything, we've got -2, -1, 2, 0, and 0, root 2 on 2, take 1. And that's everything we need to do. So that is our graph of the square root function. All right, so part B asks us to sketch the graph of g of x, where g of x equals h of -x plus 1. So let's work out what that equation actually is. So h of x equals 1/2 square root of x plus 2, take 1. H of -x plus 1 is equal to 1/2, and we changed the x to -x plus 2, take away 1 plus 1. So we cancel these out, which equals 1/2 of 2 minus x. Now, what is our endpoint going to be of this graph? Our endpoint occurs when this under here equals 0, which means that when x equals 2, when this thing equals 0, x equals 2. which means that our endpoint is 2, and because this is a 0 here, our endpoint is 2, 0. Which means that it starts up here somewhere. Well, not somewhere, it starts exactly here. And we know that it's going to have another y-intercept, so we need to work out what that is. So the y-intercept occurs when x equals 0. So we sub in x equals 0, and g of x, or was it g of 0, equals 1/2, 2 take away 0, plus 0, which equals root 2 over 2. And then that's our y-intercept. So root 2 is 1.4, like I mentioned before. That divided by 2 is 0.7. So that lies about here. Because this is a negative x here, we actually, the graph actually goes the opposite way. It's reflected over the y-axis. So what we get is a graph that looks something like this, where this is equal to 0, root 2 over 2. And we've already got our endpoint 2, 0 labeled, which means that all we have to do is that. So we've got our x-intercept, our y-intercept, and we've drawn the graph, which is all we need to do. 3 marks. Simple.